Go for the 2.com. We're into the week 12 predictions. What can you say about week number 11? A bad week, 2-5 overall. We're going to look to rebound this coming Saturday. I feel some strong sentiments about the upcoming games this coming weekend. Let's get right into it. Texas A&M travels to Vanderbilt to take on the Commodores. Vanderbilt fresh off a 21-17 victory over Kentucky, but they've struggled with some speed teams on their schedule this year, like Houston, that exposed that secondary. I think it's the same type of effort for Texas A&M this weekend. Texas A&M averaging about 251 passing yards per game. I think the speed of A&M on the perimeter is the difference. Look for A&M to spread that out Vanderbilt, put a lot of pressure on that defense, jump out to an early lead, and more importantly, put pressure on the Vanderbilt Commodore offense to respond. Vanderbilt still minus in turnover margin entering this game. They're -6, but more importantly, -6 at home. So they haven't played well at home this year. I think it's an upstart A&M team that got righted last week in College Station, a solid 41-17 victory at home. I think the momentum continues for Kevin Sumlin. More importantly, I think John Chavis will have a solid defensive game plan in place. I look for Myles Garrett and that defensive front to confuse the offensive line of Vanderbilt, put pressure on the Commodores, and I think that that's the difference. I think Texas A&M gets a convincing 17-point road victory. I think it's high scoring. I think Texas A&M is able to get a 44-27 victory over Vanderbilt this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup taking place in the Pac-12. USC travels to Autzen Stadium to take on Oregon. Both teams 4 straight winning streaks. USC's won 4 straight. Oregon's won 4 straight. Oregon dominating road victory 38-36 over Stanford. Was close, 2 points. They needed a 2-point conversion at the end. The defensive stop on Kevin Hogan and the Cardinal, but Vernon Adams and the offense played very well. But they're going to be playing a very red-hot USC defense. USC over the last 4 games only allowing 83 rushing yards per game. They've shut down some solid rushing attacks in the Pac-12. Teams like Utah, teams like Arizona, they held Arizona to 60 rushing yards on the afternoon. This was an Arizona team on the year that's averaging well over 200. They're in the area of about 244. USC's defense creating turnovers and creating turnovers on the road. They're +10 overall in turnover margin, but more importantly, +4 in turnover margin on the road. You look at Oregon's secondary, they're allowing 317 passing yards per game. I think the advantage goes to Cody Kessler and the USC Trojans. They're averaging 295 passing yards per game. I think the speed on the edge, guys like Juju Smith will stretch that secondary of Oregon. That'll open up the rushing attack for Ronald Jones and Davis later in the game. And I do think that USC gets a convincing road victory. I think it's in the area of 10 points, but I think they hold the lead from start to finish. I think USC never looks back. I think it's a 44-34 USC Trojan victory, and they move on to 8-3 on the year. Another intriguing matchup, Memphis travels to Philadelphia to take on Temple. Memphis has lost 2 straight. Temple coming off a disappointing road loss to the South Florida Bulls. But you look at Memphis overall, they're still averaging 43 points per game, have a solid quarterback in Paxton Lynch. They like to throw the football. They're averaging around 344 passing yards per game. You look at this Temple defense right now. Over the last 3 games, they've allowed 226 rushing yards in the last 3 games alone. This defense, to me, is wearing down. They allowed well over 300 rushing yards to South Florida. They got beat up by a very physical, heavy offensive line, and the Bulls now have to come back home and are going to be spread out by an up-tempo attack, a solid up-tempo attack in Memphis. I think that's the difference on Saturday. Quarterback play is going to be an issue. I think the Memphis Tigers have the better quarterback, Paxton Lynch over P.J. Walker in this matchup. Same type of affair as Texas A&M and Vanderbilt. I think if Memphis jumps up early, can put a lot of pressure on the Temple offense to respond, and I think the Tigers get a convincing road victory this coming weekend. I think it's a convincing victory, 17 points. I think Memphis gets a 40-23 victory on the road in Philadelphia this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup is Mississippi State on the road in Fayetteville against Arkansas. Arkansas coming off a very impressive road victory in Baton Rouge. They've won 4 straight, playing very well right now. They coming off a 5-sack performance against LSU. They now come back home to face a deflated Mississippi State team. Mississippi State got beat up by Alabama 31-6, but they've owned the series over the last 3 years over Arkansas. They're 3-0, have won those games by 15 points per game, and I think that it's Dak Prescott's ability to stretch Arkansas secondary vertically will be the difference in this matchup. You look at Mississippi State overall, averaging around 293 passing yards per game. Arkansas giving up around 280 passing yards per game. Entering that game last week against LSU, they only had 8 sacks. They did pick up 5 sacks on the night, but it was because LSU fell behind, became one-dimensional offensively. Don't think that'll be the case with Mississippi State. Look for Dak Prescott to utilize his mobility. Look for those receivers of De'Runnya Wilson and Fred Ross to expose that Arkansas secondary. And I think Mississippi State jumps out early and does get a convincing 13-point victory on the road. I think it's in the area of the 30s. 34-21, Mississippi State does get the road victory this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup, Notre Dame and Boston College taking place in Fenway Park. Notre Dame coming off a lackluster 28-7 victory over Wake Forest. That was a very solid defensive Wake Forest team statistically. They've been playing very well over the last few weeks, just could not stretch teams vertically, but Notre Dame jumped out early, never looked back. They held on for the 28-7 victory over Wake Forest. Boston College is coming off a bye week. Last couple of games, defense is worn down because of the inability of their offense to score points. But I think that this is Boston College's bowl game right now. They're only 3-7, but they're a very solid rush defense, only giving up 71 rushing yards per game. They can create sacks. This is a defensive front that's very physical, very blue collar, going to challenge Notre Dame on the defensive side of the ball to really stretch that team vertically. And this is a beat-up Notre Dame team right now. You look at Boston College, they're going to want to favor a very low-scoring game. Think they can get Notre Dame into a methodical, blue-collar, ugly type of ball game where it's very low-scoring, and I think Boston College could be in this game from start to finish. They're going to be throwing back the Doug Flutie throwback unis this coming weekend. It's on a neutral field site in Fenway Park. Expect packed capacity, so I expect the Eagles to be up into this matchup, and I think the week off has benefited this team physically. Thought it was a worn-out offensive defensive lines over the last couple of weeks because of Boston College's inability to stretch teams vertically with their offense. A lot of inexperience at the quarterback position, but the extra week off should benefit Boston College, give them ample time to implement different types of schemes into this game plan. And I think Boston College is in this game from start to finish. In the end, I do think Notre Dame gets a 17-13 victory over Boston College, but Boston College is in this game from start to finish. Eagles play very tough this coming Saturday. Another intriguing matchup is North Carolina and Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech right now playing well. They're sitting at 5-5, coming off a very impressive road victory over Georgia Tech. What can you say about North Carolina? They've won 9 straight since their opening season loss to South Carolina, where they lost that matchup 16-13. Marquise Williams and this offense is putting up points at a premium over the last couple of games against Duke and Miami. The offense is averaging 62.5 points per game. Defensively, still solid, much better than they were last year, but they do have some holes that I think Virginia Tech can exploit. You look at this North Carolina defense overall. Still giving up around 206 rushing yards per game. They're giving up around 383 total yards per game. Still giving up around 42%, 43% on third downs. You look at the Virginia Tech offense right now. They're able to run the football with McMillan. They have a solid quarterback in Michael Brewer that seems to be getting acclimated. And I think it's the tight ends that are the difference on Saturday. Cam Phillips and Isaiah Ford are the wideouts that should be able to create pressure on that secondary. But I look at Ryan Malik and Bucky Hodges that can create mismatch problems on nickelbacks and linebackers for the Tar Heels in this matchup that I think could put some pressure on that secondary. And I look at that Virginia Tech defense playing much better against the run over the last couple of weeks. And more importantly, they're able to create penetration, which allows those Virginia Tech linebackers to fill running lanes. They've been very opportunistic over the last couple of weeks, created 7 turnovers, 6 fumbles, 1 interception in the last 2 games. So this is an opportunistic defense in Virginia Tech. I like the way they're playing. I like their defense alignment, Daddy Nicholas and Luther Matty. I think they can create penetration against Marquise Williams, keep him in the pocket, and I'm calling for the upset. Michael Brewer and the Virginia Tech Hokies knock off North Carolina this coming weekend in Blacksburg. I think it's high scoring, but I think it's very close from start to finish. But in the end, Va-Tech gets the 31-27 victory over North Carolina. Keep in mind that last year, Virginia Tech did get the road victory, 34-17 over the Tar Heels. Just think from a scheme perspective, Virginia Tech matches up very well. Frank Beamer, this is his last year, team playing very emotional for their coach. I look for an upstart effort out of the Hokies. They get the home victory this coming weekend. Another intriguing matchup in the ACC, Pittsburgh and Louisville. Louisville's won 4 straight, but they've come against opponents with a combined record of 12-28 overall. They beat 4 straight 3-7 teams. So this is a team that has beaten up on mediocre competition. They now go on the road to face a very solid defensive front in Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh quarterback Nate Peterman playing very well in the system. They're coming off a solid road performance in Duke. They were tied 10 apiece before they pulled away, put up a 31 spot on the Duke Blue Devils, and I like the way Nate Peterman's playing within the system. You look at this defense right now for Pittsburgh, playing very opportunistic and are very solid in the run, only giving up around 139 rushing yards per game. Think they could put some pressure on Kyle Boland, put some pressure on that offensive line of Louisville. Keep in mind, Louisville's offensive line has allowed 36 sacks on the year. That's one of the worst offensive lines in the country. Pat Narduzzi's a defensive coach. Like the way Pitt's playing. I think they get a convincing victory over Louisville this coming weekend. I think it's in the area of 30-14. Pittsburgh gets the victory. I think they hold Louisville in check this coming weekend. 30-14. Pittsburgh gets the victory over the Louisville Cardinal. Should be a very interesting weekend of college football. The big games, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan State, all the big ones that I haven't covered today will be on my radio show this coming Saturday on Yahoo Sports Radio Network, 10 a.m. through 11 a.m. Eastern Time. Stay with me all season long. College football is the best. I just love talking about it.